Can you please allow the children to unmute?
Hello.
Yes, Yashasvi, you're audible.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everybody. So, in the previous classes, we talked about the law of total probability, which says that if there's one event, if there's one big event, like in a sample space B, and there are several other events which like coincide with this event, then the law of total probability states that these small events and if A1, A2, A3 are like three small events, and B is a big event in the sample space which coincides with these three like separately. So then the probability of A1 intersection B plus A2 intersection B plus A3 intersection B will be the total probability of the sample space. So then we like where we apply this is in like the test the disease problem, like if somebody is affected with a disease and they test positive or something like that. So we use it here. And we also discuss the common mistakes that we make in probability, like the difference between independence and conditional independence, and then the probability of A when B is given, and the probability of B when A is given. These are two different things. They're not the same. So in independence and conditional independence, we talked about the fact that if A and B are independent, if A is not affecting B in any way, they may be they may belong to the same scenario. But in conditional independence, if A and B are dependent on a separate variable, which we can call C, that means they're conditionally independent. So, for example, we take two people, and two people flip a coin. If and The outcome of one person getting a heads or tails and the other person getting heads or tails is they are independent. Whereas if we consider that the coin is biased towards heads or towards tails, if one person gets heads or one person gets tails, then we automatically assume that the coin is biased and it could be biased towards heads or tails. So the A and B are the coins being flipped, whereas C is the fact that it could be biased on one of the sides, the coin. Then we talked about the Monty Hall problem briefly, where there are three doors. Two of the doors contain two goats, and one of the door contains a car. So so we are given an option to open one door. We can pick a door of our choice, and the other door is opened by the person like arranging or like giving you the scenario, and that a door contains a goat. So should you go for the study is that should you go for the other door, or should you stick to the door you've opted for to get the car? So we've discussed that generally it's better to always switch than stick to the door that you've chosen, because the probability is greater for the other door to have the car, because the door that we opened has a probability of 1/3, whereas the other two doors will have a probability of 2/3. But since the other door is already revealed, that means that the 2/3 has moved to the other door completely, because we know the outcome of one door. So it's always better to switch than stick. This is what we discussed in the last class.
Yeah. Good morning, all. So, am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that was a good recap. And yeah, I have a few clarifications to make within the recap. I'm not sure if everyone has the same doubts. So, regarding conditional independence and independence, I'll just make sure. Oh, can everyone see my screen? Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yeah, okay. So in the last class, we talked about conditional independence and independence. So just to make things clear, so if A and B are two events in some sample space S, so you say that events A and B are independent if the probability that A and B happen multiplies out like this. And you can't always say that the intuitive understanding of independence that A does not affect B is always right. Almost always that intuition would work, but there are scenarios that we have seen in some of the examples before where A and B, like when you think about it, like had some sort of dependency, but they turned out to be independent, and likewise the other way. So, I mean, just stick with the definition. Don't go with the intuition the whole time. But to verify the answers, intuition would obviously help. But yeah, so whatever you do, make sure this definition holds. And for conditional independence, you say when you have another event C, you say that A and B are conditionally independent if this happens. And the example that you can think about is the fire alarm example, if you guys remember. Should I explain the example again, or do everyone remember the example? Can you please say it in the chat? That will save us some time. Do everyone remember the fire alarm example, which we showed? I mean, which was a counter example we used to show that conditional independence, I mean, independence does not imply conditional independence. I'm not sure if the chat is active for everyone. Can you please verify just, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Children, are you able to send chat messages to sir and to everyone?
Okay. Yeah, okay. So to repeat the example, this was the example. So there's a fire alarm at some place, and the fire alarm turns on under two conditions. Either when there is a fire, goes off when there is a fire, or someone makes popcorn and it smokes up or something. And these are the two events under which the fire alarm would get activated. So the condition we are looking at was that, okay, so you know that the fire and someone making popcorn are totally independent events, because like fire breaking out in some part of the campus is independent of someone making popcorn in another part of the campus. All right. So fire, the event where fire happens and the event where someone is making the popcorn are independent events. Now, what we're going to do is we condition this on the fact that the fire alarm goes off. So when we are talking about the probability that the fire happens and the fire alarm goes off. So A denotes the event where the fire alarm goes off. So I'm just writing it as A here. And the popcorn is just P, the event P where someone is making a popcorn. So when I say that the fire happens, given that the fire alarm goes off and no one is making popcorn. So when you look at this probability is 1, because you know that conditioned on the fact that the alarm goes off, someone not making popcorn completely tells you that the fire has happened somewhere on campus. So somewhere fire happening, given that the fire alarm goes off, tells you complete information whether someone has smoked up popcorn. So Is the idea of conditional independence clear? So these were two independent events to start with. Now conditioned on the fact that the alarm has went off, has gone off. So you completely know that either the fire has happened or the popcorn is the one which is causing the alarm. So that's why the probability is 1. Is the idea clear for everyone? Can someone clarify?
Sir, are you receiving messages directly?
No, actually. I received just one message, but 2 messages, but other than that, nothing.
Okay. Imtiaz, sir, can you allow them to message to everyone?
All right. So can people let me know whether their chats have been activated?
Yeah. Yashasvi, can you please try sending a message to everyone and let me know if it's working?
Oh, okay. So Anusha right now messaged me that like they can only message me directly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you please change that?
Yes, sir. I'll call Imtiaz, sir. Maybe sir is not on.
Yeah, sure. Should I pause the lecture till then, or like can I continue?
No, sir, you continue because they're able to message you directly.
Yeah. That's right.
Yes,
Yeah, sure.
thank you.
So I hope this example is clear for everyone. So now let's. Okay. So last class we ended with the Monty Hall problem, and we had defined the problem just to make sure everyone gets it clear, because the definition of the problem actually changes the answer a lot. So we'll state the Monty Hall problem again and see how we can solve it. So, okay. So this was actually a reality show where Monty Hall is a person who actually conducted the show, and he would call up a random person from the audience or like someone who applied for the event. And then that person gets to choose one door out of these 3 doors. And everyone, including the audience, know ahead that, I mean, before the audience, I mean, the person is being called out to the stage, the person who walks into the stage knows that one of these doors have a car, whereas the other 2 are goods. So this info is known to everyone. And Monty Hall additionally knows the door which has the car. Okay. So that is a very important fact. And that is what is causing some sort of a confusion when you try to intuitively solve this problem. Okay. So we have 3 doors with 2 goats and 1 car. And yeah, so you want the car and not the goats. All right. And so we can assume without loss of generality. So W log is just without loss of generality, that we always pick door number 1. Okay. And this is without loss of generality because whichever door you pick, you can just call it as door number 1 and rename the other doors. Okay. So this you can do because you can always rename the doors and make the door you pick always as door number 1. All right. And so under this assumption, we always know that door 2 or 3 are the doors which will be opened by, I mean, one of which will be opened by Monty. Okay. So door 2 or 3 is opened. And the door which is opened always has a goat behind it. Why? Because, I mean, if it has a car, then the whole thing is pointless. Because you are the person who has to get the car, right? So now the question is, under these assumptions, okay, so another assumption that everyone should understand is the fact that when you have an option, so let's say the car is behind door number 1. In that case, you have two options, either to pick, I mean, Monty has two options, either he can open door 2 or door 3, and this happens with equal probability. So this happens with equal probability, and there's no bias towards door 2 or door 3 in that case. Okay, with all these assumptions, the question is it beneficial to switch? So you have picked door number 1 and you either switch to 2 or 3 depending on the door Monty had opened. Is the setup clear for everyone?
Chat for everyone is enabled, so you can test and say yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Please post to everyone so that everyone knows that everyone is there. Okay. Fine. So now let's proceed to see how we are going to solve this problem. So as you know, I mean, as you guys have already said, the answer is going to be that it's beneficial to switch. And the 2/3 explanation that I've got till now is not the right way to look at it. So there are many ways how this problem can be solved. And the 2/3 explanation is not that simple just to say that like it's 2/3 because the 1/3 part is left out or something like that. To understand this formally, like let's look at the counter argument. So say if Monty opens door 2, if Monty opens door 2, then we know that the door 2 has a goat behind it. All right. So that we know. So I'm just assuming he opens door 2. Now that door 2 has a goat, the remaining two doors, the door 1 and door 3. So one is going to have a car and one is going to have a goat. So what you need is a car. And since the goat is one of the goats, I mean, you have identified one of the goats. What you're left with is a car and a goat. Okay, so in this situation, 1 or 3 has a car. And as I stated, the car can be, okay, so an additional point that I'm adding here is going to be car can be in 1, 2, or 3 with equal probability. Equal probability. Okay, so now since we started with equal probabilities, the car can be behind 1 or 3, and so there are two options, and one of which is going to be the car, so that's 1/2 probability, right? So that is 0.5. Okay, is this I mean this is a wrong intuition, but is this clear for everyone what I just said? Can yeah. Okay. I would like to see a lot more yes or no's. I'm only seeing around 5 when there are 70 participants.
Yeah, children, you need to be a little more proactive, please.
Okay. Even now I only see around 6. Okay. Okay, it's just 7. I'm not sure where others are. Okay, I think this is the right time to give a question and then ask
Yes,
you guys
sir.
to solve it right now.
Yeah.
Should I do
Yes.
that?
Yes, sir. I think Google Classroom is a nice platform.
Okay. If I don't see like say around 20, then I'll definitely do it right away. Otherwise, I'll proceed because that actually hinders the flow of the class. But still, yeah, I would know that you guys are active at least. Okay, only 13 people have responded till now. Ma'am, I think you can use this as your attendance for today.
Yes, sir.
That should be a better option.
Sure, sir. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, as soon as I proceed, the attendance is closed. I don't know what you guys are gonna do, but yeah. I'll wait for maybe say 1 more minute and then proceed. Ma'am, should I proceed? So I think you've got your attendance. It's
Yes, sir.
around
Yes, sir.
30 people. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So yeah. So to proceed, so this line of reasoning has an issue. Can someone tell me what the issue is? So the argument only takes into account that door 2 has a goat, but there is something crucial that I have missed here. Can someone point out what I've missed here? Or I will come back to this question. Please do think about it because I don't want to spend more time here. So this is half, and this is not the right way of looking at it. Okay. So the right way of looking at it would be to consider something more. So there is something more to be considered, which I'm missing out. And I'll come back to this point again. Please do think about it. So that will be a homework, but I will come back to this today. So I'll be explaining 3 ways to approach this problem. So the first way we have already seen, which was the intuitive way of looking at this. Which was that we assume we have 1,000 doors and you pick one door, fine. One door is picked. And one door from 999 remaining is revealed and it has a goat behind it. Okay. So let's assume the door you picked is again the door number 1 and one door from 2 to 1,000 is opened for you. So what are the chances that you are going to stick with? I mean, why do you want to stick with your current door? Because out of the 999, you have 998 doors remaining. And the chance that you will have a car there is going to be very high because there are 998 doors left and it could be any of those. So the idea to capture from, I mean, the idea you guys should get from here is that there is a higher likelihood that the car is going to be there in the 999 set rather than the door you picked. So it's always beneficial to switch. Okay, is the intuition clear? So there are a large number of doors towards your right hand side, and you can you have the liberty to pick from any of those, and you already know that one of the doors is gone and that door does not have the car behind it. So you can switch to any other door. I'm not saying like you have to switch to a specific door, but switching always benefits you, right? So did everyone understand that? Please comment. Yeah, okay. So now what I'm going to do is like explain the same idea using a tree. And we have seen this tree diagram idea in one of the first few classes, I think. So what we are going to do is like draw a tree diagram and figure out the probabilities that Monty opened a specific door. Okay. So to look at it from, okay. So there are three doors that Monty can open. 1, 2, and 3. And the fact that Monty opens door 2, say, it means that the door 2 has a goat. All right. So the Monty opening the door is dependent on which door has the car. All right. So to start with, we pick door number 1. That's going to be our initial node. And these are going to be 3 nodes, 1, 2, and 3, which has a car. Okay. So with equal probability, 1, 2, or 3 can have the car behind it. So that's 1/3 probability on these lines. And now when 1 has the car, Monty can open door 2 or door 3. So this is door 2 or door 3. Fine. And this happens with equal probability, half. That's how we defined it. So totally door 2 is opened with probability 1/3 times 1/2, which is 1/6. And similarly for door 3 here. So the 1/6 is the probability that Monty opens Monty's door or whatever. Okay. So the second level is Monty's door opening probability. The first level is the probability of having a car behind a specific door, and the root node is the node the door you picked. Okay. Now similarly, if you complete the tree, so if 2 has the car, then Monty does not have any other choice. He just has to, he just opens 3. And in the case where 3 has the car, he opens 2. And this happens with probability 1. So this is just 1/3 times 1 and 1/3 times 1. So the probabilities that we are going to look out for are the probabilities in the last level, which I mean by these. Okay. So these are the probabilities that I'm looking at right now. Now, say Monty opened door 2. So consider the event where Monty opened door 2. Fine. So which of these branches should I consider? Can someone tell me which of these branches I should consider to understand this event? First and the third branch. Yeah, I think you meant this and this. Is that right? These are the two branches you meant, right? Or no? Okay. Not sure what is second and third branch because there are many branches, sub topmost and the bottommost branch. Okay, those are the ones that I've shaded. Fine. So now considering these two branches, if you look at the end of it, so the Monty opened door 2 and door 2. That's all you had to check for. And what are the probabilities? So now this can be conditioned upon, because we already know that the door 2 has been opened. And what we need to know is the probability that we will get a car by switching. And let's denote this event of opening door 2 by M2, and say probability that get car. When I write get car, I mean you get the car by switching. Given M2 is what we need to understand. All right. So okay, let's not even look at that. Let's look at a simpler event. Let's call C1 as the event where the first door. I'll just define this. Door 1 has car. M2 is the event that door 2 is opened. All right. So what we need to figure out right now is probability that door 1 has the car given that the door 2 is opened. Okay. Is that clear? Is it clear why I'm looking at this event? Okay. So now what we are going to calculate is this probability. And what is this probability? So you can apply the definition of conditional probability. Now, can someone tell me the answer? So see, the numerator tells you the probability that the first door has a car and the door 2 was opened. And you can just look at the tree and tell me the answer. So what is the numerator? Can someone tell me what is the numerator? Right. And can someone tell me what is the denominator? Can someone tell me what is the denominator? The numerator is right, it's 1/6. So what is probability of M2? There are two branches which you have to look at. Just look at the tree diagram. So what is the probability that door 2 is opened? So when can the door 2 be opened? There are only two cases. One is when the car is behind door 1, and one is the case where the car is behind door 3. I'm not sure why everyone is saying half and 1/3. I mean, just look at the diagram and tell me what this probability is. I mean, this is a very simple question. Okay, so if you guys don't get this, like, it would be hard for me to explain what is no, 1/2 is not the answer. I'm not sure what is 1/2 here. Or am I wrong? Okay. Oh. So you guys mean the denominator is 1/2? Yes. Ah, okay. Okay, in that case, the answer is 2/6, which is 1/3. I'm sorry. I think I confused you guys again. So the 1/2 was the denominator, so 2/6. And how did you get the 1/2? Exactly. So that is just 1/3 plus 1/6. Fine. So the total answer is 1/3. So the probability that probability that you have the car in the door you choose is this 1/3. Similarly, calculate the probability that say C3 given M2. So what is this gonna be? Okay, with the calculations would be nice. So C3 and M2 divided by probability of M2. And you guys already have given me probability of M2. So what is probability of C3 and M2? So you're saying the final answer, right? Okay, yeah, the final answer is right. So the answer is 2/3, exactly. But what is the numerator? I'm sure you calculated the numerator. Yeah, all right, 1/3. Okay, and why is it 1/3? Can someone tell me why is it 1/3? Can someone tell me why is it 1/3? Someone else who hasn't responded till now. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just a probability that you have the last branch, the bottom branch. Yeah. Fine. So that's why you have 1/3. I hope this calculation is clear. And this sort of shows you that switching is beneficial. And this is why the probability that choosing the third door when you have picked the second door. I mean, when Monty picks the second door, the probability turns out to be 2/3. Is it clear for everyone? Yeah, okay, fine. So this is one way of looking at the problem. But what we have done here is just look at the event where door 2 was opened. I would like you guys to actually go ahead, do the same calculation with Monty opening door 3, and everything would remain the same except for the fact that door 3 was opened. The probabilities would still be the same. Okay, just verify it and do verify it. Just don't assume it. And in that case, you know that whether you end up opening, I mean, Monty ends up opening door 2 or door 3, switching is always beneficial. Is the idea clear? Okay, so verify M3. And because of that, we know that probability of switching is 2/3. And the probability that you switch given M2 is equal to probability that you switch given M3. Okay. I mean, to intuitively just see this, the probability, I mean, M2 and M3 are the same before you open the door. And it only tells you where you can switch to. So if 2 is opened and you have initially picked 1, that is the main assumption that we have made, and that's without loss of generality. The switch you make when you have M2 is to 3, the third door, and the switch you make to the second door, when you have M3, the switch is to the second door. Okay, so there is no importance for the second and third door because the car can be behind any of these 3 doors. So it's the same probability. It's 1/3 probability to start with for the car being behind 2 or car being behind 3. And for that reason, the probability that you switch given M2 and probability that you switch, switch denotes the event where you win by switching, that you get the car. Get car is what I mean here. By switching. Get car by switch. Okay. These two probabilities turn out to be the same. Okay, and why is the left hand side true? Why is this true? This is true because we have seen that whether you pick door 2 or door 3 to be opened, both the probabilities end up being the same, and so the probability that you win by switching is independent of the fact whether door 2 or door 3 was opened, and so unconditionally probability of switching is the same as when you condition it on something. Is the idea clear? Is the idea clear for everyone?
Children, if it is not clear, you can ask sir to explain again. Okay, it's clear.
Okay, fine. So this statement is fine. And we got this solution by looking at the tree diagram alone. And this was not based on anything else. And basically using conditional probability. But yeah, the tree diagram gives you most of it. And the next method that we are going to see now is using the law of total probability. Okay, using law of total probability. This is the second method, and yeah, we can call this as the first method. Fine. Okay, how can we see this using law of total probability? So the idea of law LOTP is just to know which one to condition on. So what is LOTP? LOTP basically says the unconditional probability of, say here, switching. So I denote this by S. So probability of switching is something, probability of switching times some event which you condition on times the probability of that event. Okay, and you sum over those events that you're conditioning on. So here the conditioning would be what you really want. So what do you want here? So you wish you knew where the car was. So you wish you knew where the car was. Okay, this is what you want to know, but you actually don't know, because if you knew this, then you're done. So it can be behind say 1, 2, or 3. So CI is where the car was. Okay. So this is the LOTP formula that we all have seen before. Now the probability of CI for any door is fixed. And what is that? Can someone tell me what is probability of CI in this expression? CI is the door where the car is. So for example, C1 means the event where the first door has the car. Exactly. So this is 1/3 for all 3 doors to start with. This was the initial assumption made. Now to calculate the total P of S right now. So you know that you started by picking the door 1. Okay. And if the car is behind door 1, the probability that you win by switching is 0. So the first term of this sum, so S denotes the event where you win by switching. S denotes win by switch. Okay. So when you switch and the first door has the car, then you lost it. So you basically have 0 probability of winning now. Now it is 1/3 times probability of S given C2. And what is that? So you know that the car is behind C2. And to start with, yeah. So can someone tell me what is this probability? Can someone tell me what I have to multiply with in the second term? What is probability of S given C2? Mhm. So, okay. Okay, is this clear now? Why it's 1? Can you guys please think and let me know why it's 1? Okay. Can a few more people respond so that I have an idea of what to explain? Okay, so to explain why it's 1, so if C2 as the car, so what does C2 mean? C2 means that door 2 has the car, and Monty knows which door he's gonna open. So he won't open door 2, he's gonna open door 3. Because you have already picked door 1, the only door left for him to open is door 3. And in that case, the switch means you're switching to door 2. And since you're conditioning on the fact that door 2 has the car, the probability that you win the car is 1. Is that clear? So C2 means the event that the door 2 has the car. And since Monty already knows that door 2 will have the car, he won't open door 2 for you. He'll open door 3, and he can't open door 1. So that's why he opens door 3. And when he opens door 3, the switch means from door 1 to door 2. And that will be probability 1 for winning. Is that clear? The same would happen for S given C3 as well. Is it clear now?
Is it clear, children?
Okay, fine. And yeah, so that's another way of seeing why probability of switching gives you the benefit. All right. And yeah, there are probably many more ways to solve this problem. And as a homework, like I would like you guys to come up with some new way to solve this problem. Okay. So we are done with Monty Hall problem and we can proceed to Simpson's paradox. All right. This is slightly more simple to understand. So we have two doctors. One guy who is Dr. Hibbert, and the next guy is Dr. Nick. If you guys have watched The Simpsons, these are two characters. So Dr. Nick is a quack. I mean, he just appears in infomercials and then tells you that like you can get a surgery for say 100 cents or whatever. And Dr. Hibbert is a genuine doctor. And he charges a lot more than Dr. Nick because I mean surgeries are expensive. So let's look at the case where there are only two kinds of surgeries in this world. So one is heart surgery and one is band-aid removal. Okay, so both these surgeries can result in a success or failure. Yeah, I don't know what failure in band-aid removal means, but let's assume that exists. And you are given two tables, uh, one for Dr. Hibbert and the next one for Nick. The first table tells you how many successes have been there for Hibbert, and the second table tells you how many successes have been there for, I mean, success and failures for both Nick and Hibbert would be specified by these tables. So the left hand side is number of success and number of failures. So let's say there were 70 successes and for the heart, and this is for band-aid. Heart and band-aid. All right. So what 70 tells you is that Hibbert performed some number of surgeries and 70 of them were successes. So to start with, assume both Nick and Hibbert performed a total of 100 surgeries. Okay. And 70 of them were success for Hibbert in, I mean, when he did the heart surgery, and 20 of them were failures, and the band-aid all of them were successes. So out of out of total 100 surgeries, 70 of them were successes when he for the heart ones, and 20 were failures for the heart, and 10 were successes for the band-aid removal. Okay, and similarly these are the numbers for Nick. So 81 successes in band-aid removal and 9 failures there, and 2 successes in by with heart surgeries and then 8 failures. Okay, and both performed a total of 100 surgeries. Now the question is, what is the success percentage of both? Or another question would be like, which doctor would you approach? Can you guys tell me which doctor should you approach by looking at these tables? And tell me the reason why. Since we are short on time, I can't wait too much. Can you guys tell me one name which you guys would pick with some reasoning?
This shouldn't take time at all.
Yeah, tell me some name. It's fine. And some reasoning for it. I don't see any response.
Yeah.
Okay, Hibbert. Good answer. So why wouldn't you choose Nick? So I'll give you an argument why you should choose Nick. So look at the number of successes for both. So for Hibbert, when you're calculating the success percentage, it turns out to be 80% because 70 plus 10 are successes. Exactly. So Nick, because he has lesser failures. So yeah. So Nick has 83 successes. So his success probability, I mean, the success probability for Nick is 83%, whereas Hibbert has 80% of, success probability. And the success probability is just like adding up the number of successes you have had till now. But the point to note here is that, I mean, let's look at a real world scenario where there is an expert, brain surgeon, and the number of cases he receives is a lot. So say the number of cases don't matter here, and he also receives say 100 cases in 1 year. And there is a normal surgeon who does normal surgeries. I mean, instead of band-aid removal, you can think of like the easiest surgery that you've seen, say some bone fracture or something like that. And this brain surgeon performs 100 surgeries, and also this normal surgeon performs 100 surgeries. But the brain being a more, I don't know, I mean, the brain surgeon having to do much more of complicated work because of the nuance involved in the procedure, there would be more failures. But what matters in his case are those successes, which wouldn't have happened otherwise. I mean, if the same patient went to this normal surgeon, I mean, he's dead because the brain, I mean, he's not as capable as the brain surgeon. Fine. So what you have to look at here is not the success percentage. So this is a paradox. This is why it's called a Simpsons paradox. So when you look from outside in the Simpsons world, Dr. Nick appears to be the better guy because he has 83% success rate, whereas Hibbert only has 80% success rate. And you can modify these numbers to make Hibbert look as bad as possible. So Nick will have 83%, and you can make these numbers, I mean, you can change these numbers and make, I mean, see that Hibbert has say 70% probability of having successes. Okay. And this is not the right way. I mean, I wouldn't say there is a right way or a wrong way to look at it, but if you look only at the success percentage, this is what you'll end up with. But another way to see why this happens is this. I mean, so you already know that Hibbert is a better doctor. So I'm trying to explain why Hibbert is still a better doctor. So what you can look at is this. I mean, it's some dummy equation that I'm writing down. But yeah, you'll get the sense out of it. So if you look at the numerators of these expression, it's 2 and 5. So if you add 2 and 5, you get 7. And if you add the denominators 8 plus 3, you get 11. But you know that fractions are not added like this. All right. So if you were to add fractions like this, you will end up with the answer 7 over 11. Fine. So that's the number of successes versus divided by the number of total surgeries performed in this case. So, I mean, I'm just making up some random expression here and saying that if this is how you added fractions, this is how you will get the answer as. I mean, and the way you are looking at it here is like counting. So there is one surgery and there is a second surgery. Those are the two fractions. And in the first surgery, like 3 surgeries were performed, 2 were successes. And the second surgery, 8 surgeries were performed and 5 were successes. Okay. And the total number of success is 2 plus 5, 7. And the total number of surgeries is 8 plus 3, 11. So your success percentage is 7 over 11. But what you actually need is 2 over 3 plus 5 over 8. right? Because you performed 3 heart surgeries, so 2 out of those are successes, and you performed some other surgery, 5 out of 8 are successes. That's how you should calculate this. I mean, this is another way to calculate which guy would be better. And you can also see how you can go wrong if you like end up calculating 7/11. I hope this gives you some intuition as to why this paradox is something that's existent. Okay, is the explanation clear? Do you guys see why it's a paradox, as to like why there is some counterintuitive understanding as to why Hibbert is a better doctor? Okay, I hope you guys have understood it, but to go ahead, like let's just try to write this formally with notation. What I'm trying to say is, if A denotes the event that the surgery is success, and B notes the event that the patient was treated by, say, Nick, and C denote the event that the surgery which is being performed is a heart surgery. In this case, what the table tells you is that the probability that the surgery is a success, given that Nick treated it and it's a heart surgery, is less than the probability that B complement just means the treatment was done by Hibbert for the same heart surgery. So you know this because heart surgeries were more successful for Hibbert. And similarly, you know that when the other kind of surgery was performed, Hibbert actually had 10 successes and no failures, whereas the probability of success for Nick was slightly low because he had a few failures when he did the bandage removal as well. Okay, so this is what you understand from the table. But overall, we saw that the probability of success given that Nick performed the surgery is greater than the probability of the success that Hibbert performed the surgery. So this is the paradox. So if you look at the first two inequalities, they both say that Hibbert is a better doctor, conditioned on the fact that, I mean, some specific surgery was performed. But when you total it up overall, you see that the probability that you have a success is more for Nick than Hibbert. All right. So this is the formal statement of what we have seen till now with respect to the tables. So what you can understand from this is that failing to condition on C causes the inconsistency. So all these three statements are right, and this is what we have inferred from the table and success rates. But the counterintuitiveness comes from the fact that we either condition on the heart surgery or not. Okay. So to understand this better, what you guys can do is write the LOTP for probability of A given B by conditioning it on C as well. And I'm not going to write it down here. But what you will see is, I'll just write down the first term. You'll get something similar like this. And C complement given B. So this is the probability that you will have a success if B is the event where Nick treats the patient. Okay, so this is the probability of A given B, and using LOTP we get this. If you look at the term C given B and C complement given B, it's entirely dependent on whether Nick treats the heart surgery or not. All right. and use this expression. So this is going to be a homework. I'm not going to explain the whole thing completely. So what I'm trying to say is use LOTP to verify why this counterintuitive overall statement can hold. So try to prove why this statement holds. That's my question. Okay, and the idea is to use LOTP. Now to read more about Simpson's paradox, what you can read is the story of, I mean, it's not a story, it's what actually happened. So there's a university in US called UC Berkeley. It's one of the premier institutions for engineering and everything else in this world. So UC Berkeley discriminating admissions based on gender. So you can read up this news when it happened. Okay, so what the news is basically is that in UC Berkeley, when people looked at the statistics of admissions, they saw that like they preferred men over women, but finally they sort of found out that that was not true, and it was I mean the conclusion that they were arriving at was because of Simpson's paradox. I mean, intuitively the reason was that women did not apply to certain departments even in the beginning, and it was not based on UC Berkeley's decision to discriminate. And yeah, with that I'll conclude today's lecture with, I mean, okay, so one more homework. And the homework is just a simple way to see why this paradox should hold. So it say you like, there are two types of jellies. Two types of jellies. Okay, one red and blue, say. Okay, and you have 4 jars. Okay, so to start with, say the first, and when you compare 2 jars, the left hand side jar has more red than a right hand side jar. Okay, and similarly when you compare this jar, say call these 1, 2, 3, and 4. So when you compare third jar and the fourth jar, you also see that the third jar has more reds than blues. So these jars have only red and blue jellies. But you can create a case where when you combine both these jars together, the left hand side jars, that is 1 and 3, 2 and 4, when you combine 2 and 4, you'll end up having more reds. This is what the Simpson's paradox conveys to you. And the homework is to find out the numbers. I mean, find the number of red and blue jellies in each of these jars so that the paradox happens. That's the homework. And I'll probably put it up on Google Classroom as a homework as well. But yeah, you can start working on this. Okay. So that's all for today's class.
Thank you, sir. So
Yeah.
what topics will be covered next class? Because there was a
So,
message from an MTech student,
ha,
but they have topics on naive bias, variance, covariance, and information theory, and a few other topics which is part of the internal next week. So on the fly today, when the class began,
yeah.
one child requested if it can be covered today. So I didn't want to disturb you in between the
Oh, I
class.
see. But to reach
Yes.
bias, covariance, and all, I mean, we need to know all of this.
Yes.
So, I mean, the next class is going to be random variables. So, in random variables, we'll start with discrete random variables. I mean, if that person is hearing, I'm just saying it to that person. So, we'll be starting next class with random variables. And before the next class, we'll also see an application known as Gambler's Ruin. It is an application which comes in stochastic processes and so on. So that's one topic I think that's there in the syllabus for you guys as well. So Markov chains and stuff. So we'll start with that example, then go ahead and see what are random variables. And in random variables, we'll see mean, expectation, a median mode, whatever. I mean, properties associated with random variables, PDF, probability density functions, and so on. But we won't be directly jumping to covariance and stuff because that requires a bit of understanding.
Thank you, sir. Hope this clarifies your doubt, children. Thank you so much, sir. So
Yeah, I
we'll
see some video where some person is riding on a bike or something.
Where? In your chat box?
No, it's off now.
Okay,
Get
yes.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be there in the recording. I don't know who it is.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'll ask Imtiaz to check.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much. Have
Yeah.
a nice day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Bye.